First of all, we just have to say that Jamil might have a small issue. So we will see whether we can get him on board. It's not due to him, actually. It's due to a kind of a time, what you call it, a time zone issue, which actually is on my shoulder. So let's see whether we can figure that out. But I would ask now all three of you who are here to start your cameras, please. So I would like to introduce and welcome you all to the next session, which is on the SDGs and COVID, the responsibilities of internationalization in higher education. And I would like to start today with introducing my panelists, whom I'm super proud to have here. Let's start first with Robin. Dr. Robin Helms, she's Assistant Vice President for Programs and Global Initiatives at the American Council on Education, ACE. What an abbreviation, huh? What an abbreviation in the United States. And maybe also you see the full bio for all of them, of course, on the website. But maybe also just for you to know, she has also some personal secret. And that is she is a trained yoga instructor, and she has been doing so, I think, in person, and you also do it on Zoom, which I find really fascinating, for almost 15 years. So welcome, Robin. We'll be curious to hear about your perspective. Next, Carolyn, can you switch on your camera, please?
It says when I try, it says the host would not allow me to.
Oh, then I ask you to. Now I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm here.
They are super strict here. So Carolyn, Dr. Carolyn Benton is Vice President of Global Affairs. And she became that in 2013, if I get it right, and Executive Director of the University of Tsukuba, Japan. So for you, it's already very late in the day. I realize, very grateful that you still make it. And be careful, okay? Don't mess around with Carolyn, because she has a black belt in Shoikeno, which actually I didn't know what that is, but Aikido, which I do know. So be very careful. Yeah. She can do some damage, if people are not nice to her. That's always good. That's always good. And for the moment, the last person to introduce, we will see whether we can get Jamil here. And we agreed, the cat. Honestly, before I talk to Verity, this is something I totally like about the COVID times. We are so much more relaxed, and I learned so much about all the pets and friends other people have. So, but not to get totally distracted now. So Dr. Verity Firth is the Executive Director of Social Justice at the Center for Social Justice and Inclusion at the University of Technology, Sydney. So also quite advanced in your daytime. So again, very grateful to you. And she is also something I should mention. She's the former Minister of Education and Training. So, but now you can speak freely. You're no longer in a political position. That is good for you. And she's a musician like I am. She plays the trombone. So, and maybe I also tell you something, if I still hope that we can manage to get to him, that Jamil can join. He's the global tertiary education expert, probably all of us know. And he's the World Bank's, he was the World Bank's tertiary education educator for quite a long time. And he left me with a personal note, which I really like to tell you, because it tells you also a lot about, what a nice guy he is. He says that he's one of the people, with the worst carbon footprint on the planet, which he thinks is embarrassing for someone who cares and writes about the SDGs. You can see that he wrote that. I would never tell that about him. And in a way, the pandemic has allowed him to redeem himself a little bit by not flying anymore. And instead of flying, he was playing tennis all the time. And so much so that he got a stress fracture in one of his feet. And he sees that as the punishment from the gods. So let's see that. And we will, I would say, we just give it a start. And for me, the important thing here is, let's start with a quite pragmatic view. And by the way, you will not see any slides. We decided this will be just a relaxed discussion among friends. So for me, when we look at your institution, you know, what is the strategy and the position of your organization and yourself, of course, with regard to this topic of the conference, internationalization and higher education, and particularly the SDGs? Let's start with Robin.
All right, thank you, Uwe, and thank you so much, everybody, for the opportunity to be here with you today. So for the American Council on Education, or ACE, as Uwe mentioned, the SDGs have not been, I would say, an explicit framework for organizing our work, but equity is such an anchor in our work, and the number of the focus areas in our research programs and our advocacy work align with the SDGs on the equity front. So the three that I would say figure most prominently are number 4, quality education. So we've done a lot of advocacy work, for example, around student aid in the US. So I'll pop some links in the chat in just a moment, but one example is our Double Pell advocacy campaign. This is a group effort to try to double the amount of this particular financial aid vehicle for students. We do a program called the Learner Success Lab. So really focusing, helping institutions put in place the structures to really promote student success. And that's across the life cycle as well. So we have a number of programs in that relate to lifelong learning. So our ACE credit services that help students translate credit into degrees going forward. And we do a lot with educational pathways for military veterans and credit for prior learning as well. On the internationalization front specifically, really a guiding principle in all of our internationalization work is the idea of global learning for all. So students of all backgrounds across the whole student life cycle again. So that quality education shows up very much throughout our work. The second one that really resonates, I think, with the work that we do is number 5, gender equality. So we have the ACE Women's Leadership Network that has been in place for many years to really promote networking and growth among women leaders in higher ed. We've got a particular focus within our research on women in the presidency because ACE is a presidential association. So we have some data through our American College Presidents Survey, for example. And then for the internationalization specific angle on this one, we're trying to do more bringing global perspectives into our work around women's leadership, which is largely the Women's Network, for example, has been US focused. We just did a issue brief last spring with the Boston College Center for International Higher Education that focused on women's leadership in higher ed and had authors from around the world, women authors. So really trying to elevate women leaders' voices in research as well. And then the third one, which maybe would be a little bit less expected, that really resonated in our work is good health and well-being. I think something that's on the mind of a lot of higher ed leaders right now and everybody around the world. But we do a series of surveys called Pulse Points, where we're surveying presidents on key issues. They sort of developed out of the pandemic, but the theme for the last 2 years has been mental health as a key priority for leaders, for students, for staff, and a major concern. So we have a growing body of research work there as well. And in the internationalization space, our research and programmatic work around international student and inclusion and success is very much about well-being. So a message that we have is it's not just about the numbers, it's about a holistic, really life cycle approach to student success for international students. And we've got some resources. I'll pop that one in the chat also. And then just finally, me personally, I am a middle manager. I will own that distinction, but I really see the equity and well-being of my team as the most important piece of my job, and something that I'm focusing on day-to-day decisions, asking tough questions for the organization, and really helping us, I think, continue to improve on the equity front.
That is quite interesting. I mean, that's an agenda. Hey, I mean, if we are in sort of a competition, that is interesting. No, now we can say, hey, Carolyn, so how do you compete with that? Tell us.
ACE is wonderful. And I know Robin too is very hard because I know Robin very well. Hello, Robin. Okay, so your question was, your first question.
Your strategy basically on SDGs and internationalization for society, how that relates to Tsukuba and you personally.
Okay, first, in terms of internationalization, we have been consistently ranked as the second most international university in Japan. Our founding philosophy, which was in 1972, was actually has the word our 1973 has the word internationalization in our philosophy. And we go back further to 1978. One of our principles of this goal, Kano Jigoro, who was the founder of modern judo, was said to be the first person to bring international students to Japan. Since he taught judo, he brought a lot of people to learn judo and also Japanese culture. It is said that he brought over in 7,000 students during his 23-year tenure. So we have a very strong international culture at our university. And in terms of maintaining these our strategies for internationalization, is that we build global partnerships is one of our most important partnerships. And we have a group of 11 universities that we use for called our Campus in Campus initiative, where we share education and research resources. We believe this is very important because the SDGs, they're very complex and very interdisciplinary, and you need to work, and they're global. So you need to work across borders with people from different disciplines and different countries and different cultures to be able to develop research to help solve the global initiatives. And so we are also into another strategy in terms of international strategy is that we have been designated by the Ministry of Education as a Study in Japan coordinator for all Japanese universities for bringing South American students. And we're also a core coordinator to bring in Central Asian area students into Japan. And they have many courses that we bring them to learn about, of course, our research. Much of it is focused on climate change or climate change and peace and these very SDGs related matters. And I'm also very happy to say that we 3 times in Japan, we have won the Gold Award Work with Pride Award in Japan. We've done this 3 times, and this is given to Pride Pride is for equity, and bringing in and I guess and not helping, but equity for all people, including the LGBT community as well and women. So we've won this prize 3 times in a row. So we're very happy with this. And in terms of working about climate change, for over 10 years, we have a forum called the Tsukuba E3 forum, which is based on developing very climate-friendly energy solutions. This has been going on for 10 years, where we bring research from all over the world every year to this forum. And it's a very major forum in Japan, and we are pushing such initiatives. There are many things like this we've been done. I think my 2 minutes is up.
But that's okay. Come on, interesting. I rather take 3 interesting minutes than 2 of mine. So that leads us, we move now to Australia, down under. So how is the situation with your organization?
So, well, it's late here as well. It's after midnight here in Australia, so you might see the dark outside. UTS, the university I come from, is actually the first university in Australia to sign up to report against the SDGs. And part of the reason why we did that is we already had a very big commitment around tracking our social impact as an institution. So whilst we always want to be looking at individual research projects or individual service learning or whatever the programs that may be run, what we're actually most interested in is what is our collective social impact as an institution. So prior to the SDGs, we'd actually developed our own UTS social impact framework, which fed into our strategic plan. And at the heart of that, we committed the university to being an agent for social change, transforming communities through research, education, and practice. And we use that framework to demonstrate our collective impact against key domains of change. So we track a whole range of indicators at the university. We track indicators in terms of the diversity of our student cohort, including class diversity, obviously, as well as Indigenous students and so forth. We look at the development of student social and personal responsibility and how we actually develop that in our students, both through curricular and extracurricular activity. And we also track how engaged our teaching and research is, and whether we're working alongside community as equal partners for the public good. So at the moment, what we're doing is tracking all of that data at an institutional level against our own social impact framework. But one of the weaknesses of our own social impact framework was it was very much a self-study, right? Like, so it's us looking internally at how, you know, it's useful, how we actually provide incentives and make sure that we're all working towards a shared goal as an institution. But what we're now doing, and one of the reasons why we've been really happy to engage with the SDGs, is the SDGs is a way that we can tell our story more broadly. And it's a way we can tell our story using a shared set of goals that are genuinely global in nature. So what we've done now is, luckily, we've sort of got a head start because we've been tracking all this data around our institutional performance through our own impact framework, but now we're mapping that against the SDGs. It's much more meaningful in a broader sense. And as I said, it moves us beyond a self-study to a better demonstration of our impact as an institution. Carolyn mentioned it before, but it's the universality of the SDGs that are most appealing to us, because the great advantage of the SDGs is that they've, you know, it's both an advantage and a disadvantage in some ways, but the advantage is they've simplified complex, wicked problems into a set of shared goals that can actually help us leverage collaboration, like global collaboration, national collaboration. The downside of the SDGs, of course, is that sometimes they're too simple and institutions don't sufficiently recognise just how complex and difficult it is to achieve true progress under each of these goals. So one of the things that we keep reminding ourselves as a university community, but also our partners, is that SDGs are just a stepping stone, right? Like, they're just, that reporting against them is not a goal in and of itself. It's the achievement of them that we're most interested in. So yeah, so we've been loving our journey with the SDGs.
Verity, I mean, come on. Did you see this writing on the wall here behind me? You know, I mean, what you just said, you know, that's our philosophy. Yes, exactly. It's not about what you do or what you report. It's about what you achieve. A. B, there is, as I just said with Martin, there are so few institutions who really have a kind of a coherent tracking, indicator-based tracking system. But also, of course, as I always say, I mean, impact is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You know either where it is or what it achieves, but not both at the same time. And so you can only fence it in, and this idea, okay, this is the indicator who measures it, yeah, give me that number and I tell you your impact, is just, can we say that, rubbish? And so many, I mean, so much resonates with what the three of you said right now. Can I do one thing? I mean, Verity, you can say no, okay? But we did not plan that, folks. But since you have been minister, okay, may I ask you, how did your perspective on the SDGs change from your time being a minister to moving into an institution? And folks, this is really a nasty question because I didn't tell her before. It's really something that came up right now. It's totally fine if you don't want to.
No. I'm happy to answer it. The answer is probably not. I think in some ways the challenge for government is very similar to the challenge for institutions, which is, and in fact, at the Australian level, we're still grappling a bit about how we report as a nation towards the SDGs, right? And in fact, you know, there's all sorts of arguments going on about how much you need to resource it and how do you actually do it and everything. So I don't actually think it did change. I think I've always seen the inherent value. When I was a minister, which is now 10 years ago, it was the Millennium Development Goals, not the SDGs. So I show my age there. But I think as when you're in politics and when you're in government, you always see the value of anything that can bring people together, a set of shared values, a set of shared goals around which you can get people to collaborate and leverage that for collaboration. So I think politicians understand that intimately. What I think politicians and governments are less good at is being really honest about the results and being really honest about tracking performance, because there are other considerations, on political considerations, that get in the way.
Tell me about that. Yes, if you do an evaluation for a government or kind of a political setting, very often it's, you know, this result we like to hear, that result we don't like to hear, because political decision is different from academic decision making. That is clear. Yeah.
That's right, which is why the role of academics is always to tell the truth.
Yeah, well, we should also tell that every academic, because we've seen quite a number in the last decade who did not, you know, so we're all humans and, you know, flawed. But you mentioned a word, challenge. If I turn that challenge into kind of demand or opportunity, whatever we want. Carolyn, to start with you, what do you think, what in terms of SDGs, what are the big challenges, the big demands we have to deal with in the upcoming decades, particularly in terms of universities? What should universities focus on? Because the SDGs are so broad, there's so much in it. If you say we do all of it, we know we do nothing. So what would be your priority if you could just decide for all the universities in the world, what should they focus on?
Yes, I mean, all the SDGs are very important. I'm sure they were developed and very many people who understand the world issues develop these goals. And so they're very important. So I think each university has to understand their strengths in terms of their research and in their environment they're in at that moment, and work towards solving those that they can. So I don't think we can just focus, all higher institutions to focus on one SDG, but we all all these SDGs need to be solved. So each university needs to work on the ones that they can do.
Okay, but what would be yours? If you, I am insisting here. Give me something. What is the topic? It doesn't have to be the SDG as such, the named SDG, but what would be the, you know, the challenge that faces society, which you would say, hey, we at Tsukuba, those are our foci. If it can be more than one, of course.
Okay, we are actively very active in environment and developing solutions for the environment. We have we call 3E forum, which environment and engineering, and to develop a really clean energy. So we're very strong in this area as well. Also, we do a lot of medical research and also a lot of really forward-thinking research like robotics to help people in who aren't able to walk before, or to help healthcare people lift people. So we're the first in the world to develop such things for these. So very strong in those areas as well, in those areas.
Very interesting. Verity, back to you. Yeah.
So
what's about your institution? We know now it cannot be everything for everybody, but what would be, if you could choose, what would be the focus?
Well, I'm going to say SDG 17, which is about partnerships, and I'll tell you why. So what Carolyn said, I think, is spot on, right? The point about the SDGs are that they are all interrelated, right? So there's a reason why they're expressed in a circle rather than in a ranked list. It's actually because for each SDG, you can't actually solve one SDG without solving a whole range of others. They're all intimately interrelated. They're all interdisciplinary, and they all actually need cross-sector collaboration to be solved. And I think the big challenge for universities, I don't know, maybe universities overseas are better at it, but I doubt it. The big challenge for universities is that they need to recognize the interconnection of the SDGs, and they need to also realize that they now need to work across sectors in genuine partnership, right? And this can be hard for universities because they operate on a centuries-old expert model. Like they're used to creating new knowledge that they then go and share with the world as benefactors of new knowledge. Actually, what we've got to do in the 21st century, rather than creating new knowledge on behalf of the society, we've got to create it with the society.
Oh, yeah.
We've got to have partnerships, equal partnerships, practitioners and researchers, you know, lived experience and academic experience, people working alongside in equal relationships. And so there's that methodology plus cross-sectoral. And that's something that universities, when they really seize that baton, can do really well, right? Universities are great conveners. They're seen as neutral spaces. They're seen as independent spaces. They can be the place that brings all these different people together. but they've also got to be careful about not being ivory tower about it. They've got to make sure that they have humility as they, you know, that we all have humility as we go out to seek to change
But
the
basically,
world.
I mean, one could say if we look at the dimension of social engagement, it's the difference between social outreach, you know, the old-fashioned way. Oh, we sit in the ivory tower and we know everything and we emanate our knowledge to the world to make them a better place. But we basically look down on them. That's, I think, a very old-fashioned approach. But it was there, okay? And it was maybe necessary as a first step way back then. More towards, my favorite is service learning, where I say, you know, basically the society tells us what they need. And by helping them, we learn what they really need. And not only the students who do it, often also the academics. So excellent point. I saw Carolyn was, you know, you wanted to react to that. Please do before I pass to Robin.
I completely agree with what Verity's just said. This is our stance as well. One of our keywords at our university is global trust. In terms of the SDGs, we rated #1 in Japan in terms of global partnerships. For all of Japan's universities, for #1 in global partnerships. And I also believe that we need to teach young researchers, you know, they have the new ideas, to bring them together, to work together. It's their future too. So what we have every year we have a Scuba Conference where we invite 1,300 young researchers from around the world to gather for a week, 3-4 days, to discuss their issues. It's transdisciplinary. As it was mentioned, that each issues are very connected. That's why it's very difficult to choose which ones you really want to work on. So we have this, we call the Scuba Conference, where we bring young people, the next future global leaders, to spend 3-4 days together working in scuba. And it's a very fun week for the young research. And I think another important thing is to build global partnerships for these young researchers as well.
Absolutely. Now, Robin, now you cannot tell me just what the focus of ACE is. I know you will ace that. That's clear. Come on, that pun has to come.
That was good.
But it's more about that you would need to tell me what you think, what should be the case for the universities which you know about, you relate to. So what's the opinion? So
let me start with, I'm excied what Carolyn and Verity were talking about also around partnerships, and just to bring into that kind of the ACE take or lens on that. We talk about in our model for comprehensive internationalization, just partnerships. So just a little line from that. One of the things that as we work with institutions, we encourage them to think about, regardless of the relationship format, ethical standards of practice, commitment to mutual benefit in decision-making, sustainability, and awareness of historical and systemic injustices are paramount. So that's, I completely agree. And I think the partnerships, exactly, Verity, as you said, helping us solve these major challenges, that brings me actually, Uwe, to your question of you know, sort of, if I had to pick the priority SDGs going forward for higher ed. So #8, decent work and economic growth, I think is really paramount, and certainly something we're thinking about in the US. So the expectation that higher education is going to prepare students for the workforce, not only with specific skills, but the ability to be adaptable. If the last year and a half has taught us anything, it is that we need to be adaptable. And so higher ed, I think, has an obligation to, as we think about preparing students for decent work, which ultimately will contribute to economic growth, to take a life cycle approach to career readiness and have those collaborative relationships that we were just talking about with employers and communities, so that we understand what the workforce needs, including but not limited to specific skills. Relatedly, I would say #9, also front and center, and this also speaks to Carolyn and Verity, what you were saying, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. So universities are seat of that research and development that begets innovation and begets us getting to the point that we're going to be able to solve these big global challenges.
Thanks so much. Yeah, actually, you know, it's always, I'm fascinated when I look at, you know, big institutions like yours, because if you're a small institution like us, you know, you think, goodness me, what can you do, right? But that's what's on it. I mean, it's this, you know, I think one has to start with one's own organization, of course, Like, for example, I just now changed to an electric car because I said, I'm, this is, and it's not perfect yet because Czech Republic is not that advanced in the infrastructure for it. But, early adopters, we need to adapt, and that's adopters need to adapt. And that's the main point. Very good point from your side. But I think that is those are two things that I would just like to say. One is indeed they are all interrelated, some more than others. I mean, if one looks at like 11 and 13 are really closely related, like when it's about sustainability of the cities and the climate. But then, of course, also quality of education is super closely related to reducing inequalities. By the way, that is one of the things that I don't like so much, that they call it reducing inequalities. I would have liked to call it increasing equity, because this funny picture, I didn't load it up, but you have these 4 people of different size in front of a fence, and they say, this is the inequality. And now we make it equal, so everybody gets the same kind of box to stand on. So one can look over it and the other still cannot. And equity would be that everybody gets a box which makes them in the end look on the same level over the fence than anybody else. So whatever, but I think that that to me could be maybe a call that instead of saying, universities follow the SDGs, that we start to group the SDGs, that we start to think about, and that is also in line with partnerships, what you meant, that we say, okay, there, to have a university network which says, okay, we focus on SDGs, because they group as a topic like, for example, green mobility and green campus reflects on these aspects. We reflect, it doesn't mean that we don't do the other things, but we have a focus. And indeed, it cannot be just one. Brilliant, I really like that. But so far we are quite positive. Let's be a bit negative here. When it comes to internationalization particularly, okay? And we discussed, the whole conference is about seeing that internationalization is so far not super related to social engagement yet. How do you see that? What would be, in your term, what are the gaps there? What should we do differently, newly, when it comes to internationalization to address the SDGs? Where do you see that it's not perfect yet? Let's start with Robin now.
All right, thank you, Uwe. So I think one of the things that's it's interesting for me to hear non-US perspectives in this conversation is, to what extent should we be organizing internationalization around the SDGs and having that sort of as a framework? And I mentioned earlier at ACE, the SDGs have not been an explicit framework for us, but as you get into them, many of them are very much aligned with our priorities. And I think that's reflective of our institutions in the US as well. And I would say there's a lot of variation in terms of the extent to which SDGs are an organizing principle or framework for institutions. We have some in the US where they really are institution-wide or for internationalization work, but others not so much. And I think that's okay. I mean, given in the US, the variety of institutions that we have, as we work with colleges and universities, we encourage them to align their internationalization work with their own mission and strategy and goals, and to really think about that particular alignment. And so we've been very intentional more and more in bringing the SDGs into the conversations that we're having with institutions and encouraging them to think about what does resonate. Does it make sense to have your work explicitly framed around the SDGs, or are you embedding them in different ways? So that piece, I think, we're going to still see a lot of variety, but we are intentionally trying to sort of bring them into the conversation and offer it as a framework that institutions can take on as well. Yeah, I'll stop there.
No, that's fine. Carolyn, how about you?
Okay, SDGs is a big topic in Japan right now. It has been. The government is really pushing SDGs. A lot of the research funding is also being targeted at SDG for SDG resolution. And even before around the same time, our former prime minister developed what we call the Society 5.0. Society 5.0 is, you say information society, 4.0, but we say Society 5.0, which is a human-centered, a very human-centered society where everyone is kind to each other, and the business and the environment, and so this is what has been the vision for Japan, and much of the government funding is based on this. So a lot of Japanese research is, even though they don't explicitly say it's SDGs, but much of it is designed to solve the SDGs. Yeah. So the big problem is, so our lead researchers, our major, the established research, are developing partnerships across the world because they want to work with the best researchers themselves. So I think what we in Japan need to do is to help our younger researchers develop these connections. Have these older researchers, give them the connections with partnerships, and let them develop these partnerships to help solve the SDGs.
Thank you. Folks, Jamil is here, and Jamil, we all have, I have to apologize because here we fell into the gap of the time zones, because if we had gone even an hour later, then it would have been like 1 o'clock in the morning for Verity. So folks, if it is okay, I would really like to do it the way that we give the word to Jamil. And folks also in the audience, we will do 5 minutes more. I'm the boss of the timeline, so what? So Jamil, I also already introduced you, so that's fine. But can you just tell us what you think are the things that universities should focus on when they do internationalization right now, with a view to the SDGs? What are the things that you see as the biggest demands? And just say whatever you like. I'm so happy that you made it in time. I felt so bad about that.
How many minutes do I have?
You have, well, I give you a luxurious 4 to 5 minutes.
Please stop me. Thank you so much, Uwe. Thank you for the invitation. And I'm terribly sorry about the mix-up about the time. I thought I had it right, and really
no, well, we both had it right, which means I had it wrong. So it's all on me. Go ahead.
So I think something wonderful happened during the pandemic, in spite of all the horrible things that have happened and are still happening. Because what I realized is that in many aspects, internationalization had become some sort of a luxury item for well-to-do universities or well-to-do students in universities in developing countries. And all of a sudden, by necessity, as people could not travel anymore, I've seen through many networks. For example, I've been very impressed by something called APRU. I think it's the Asia Pacific Rim University Network that brings together universities from East Asia, from Latin America, from North America, from down under, Australia and New Zealand. And they've come up with terrific ways of doing international things, from the weekly the cultural week, the mirror classes, etc., etc. And I think we've realized that you can travel virtually and still do very interesting things, contribute and learn. So I think that's a profound lesson from the pandemic, that of course we all want to travel again, and actually I'm in Europe for the first time after 2 years since I live in Latin America, but there are many more ways to do internationalization in a profound way, not only superficial half-hour visits. I think that I think we've just begun to touch these new alternatives, and I think there is a lot to learn from what has happened and to see how you can do it systematically. So from that point of view, I think that internationalization can be strengthened, amplified through partnerships, co-construction of curriculum, joint research. And in terms of the link with the SDG, I think the SDGs put on the agenda of universities really to shake the old notion of the ivory tower and really push universities to think about their role in society. And if you do it right, you realize that teaching and learning, research and engagement with society can be reorganized through the filter of the SDGs. And I've been for the past almost 20 years now, been very critical of international rankings. But I must say that Times Higher Education's new impact ranking, I think, has very interesting features. Not the ranking itself, because ranking universities from what to whatever.
Yeah, let us not start into that, because.
But the question they ask, and they force universities to ask themselves about what is their contribution to the SDGs, I think is a very healthy exercise independently from the results. So, I mean, as you know, Uwe, I've been writing a lot about the SDGs and coming myself from a developing country, originally Morocco. I'm very, it's very dear to me. I think it's very important, and I think it's also very useful for universities because many of them are doing already, or have been doing, very important and relevant things without realizing that it fitted into this SDG framework. But it's all about playing a positive role vis-a-vis society, starting with how you train, the kind of education you give to your students, the content of your curriculum, your carbon footprint. As are you a green university?
I mentioned your sentence on the footprint.
And also moving into more interdisciplinary approaches, away from this silly traditional segmentation along disciplines, and realizing that to tackle today's big challenges, it's not chemistry or economics or philosophy on its own, but it's working together, asking new questions from different angles. And I think that really opens up good, positive prospects for universities all over the world.
Excellent. Just to also relax the next group, I've seen everybody is there. I just demoted them all to attendees, but be relaxed. We will take this one here a little bit longer because there was a time of kind of a time mesh up with Jamil. So I thought I wanted to give the audience a chance to engage with him and the others. I would say before we have a super one-sentence final statement from everybody, I would like to open the floor still for a few questions. So whoever would like to pose a quick question, may you raise your hand or be silent forever. Now we're not in a wedding here. So anybody has a question to the panel? I count down from 3 to 1. If I'm at 1, we start with the final statements. 3, that puts pressure on people. 2, now people start to sweat. Where is the button to press? 1. Yeah, that was your chance. So that means we move around the table. I give Jamil, oh wait, somebody, just on the last second, somebody mentioned it. There is a QA question. Many institutions tend to equate, that's a long one, sustainable to sustainability and focus on environment as aspects to it. As a result, it becomes territorial issue situated and owned by the institution's sustainability or facility office. So instead of partnerships, we see silos and the ignorance of holistic aspects like social culture. Comments from the, oh yes, they can make a lot of comments on that. I would suggest you could maybe just, I will put this question as a text into the chat. And since everybody now can chat, I opened that option. It should be possible that you could answer that afterwards in the chat if you're fine with that. Okay, so I put that there already. And then I would say final words, goodness me. So the one sentence statement. We start with Robin. What is your final statement?
All right. Well, thank you. It sounds very final. No, I would just mention that ACE right now is in the midst of a strategic planning process for our own organizational internationalization and global engagement. And everything we talked about today, all of these topics are really front and center in our emerging focus areas as we craft our own plan going forward. And the areas where ACE really wants to be a bigger part of global dialogues and solutions. So we are looking forward to engaging more on these and other key issues with everyone going forward. Thank you.
Wow, that was quick. Carolyn, your take on it, the last statement from Tsukuba today.
Okay, I think I think it's very important that we as educators really try to make our young students engaged, to feel that they have the power to work towards something, and they are independent and they need to do this. And I had a really wonderful experience this weekend. A group of 300 students from 30 different universities and also from Scuba. Scuba students were the coordinators. They developed their own college summit for peace. They gathered people from around Japan online, and they also try to drag in a lot of researchers online to discuss. And it was all their idea. They were very engaged about this topic, about the SDGs. SDGs was the main topic. So when I heard these young undergraduate students, all these students are very engaged, and kind of gave me hope that they really want to work on this and they work toward working together. So I was really happy about this. This is in my mind because I just had this on Sunday, and it was all their idea. No pushing.
Thanks for sharing. Verity.
Yes, I also want to talk about students, because I think that this generation of students are really quite revolutionary, to be honest. And I think that they have grasped more than generations before them just how much we now need to do in the 21st century to get ourselves out of this mess. And I want to close with the student pulse survey that was undertaken by Times Higher Ed, actually, and they interviewed 2,000 prospective students from across the world. Out of this, 75% of the prospective students had heard of the SDGs. 79% of these students believed universities have an important role to play in achieving the SDGs. 80% of the prospective students agreed that it's important for them to live their lives in a way that is consistent with being a sustainable citizen. And 82% of these students said that that universities have an important role to play in teaching that sustainability and that civic mindedness, knowledge, skills and practices and values of sustainability. I thought that that was just such an indication of where our students are at the moment on all of this. And they actually went through and labelled their top 3 priorities in terms of the SDGs. And their top was quality education, and then climate action, and then zero hunger. So that's the voice of our young people, and universities are still places where young people gather to change the world, and we must be responsive to that.
Thanks so much. And who else should have the really last word in this round other than Jamil? Jamil?
Thank you, but Caroline and Robin and Verity have said very profound things, and it's hard to add to that. I think the prospect, looking at perspective from the students is very wise, and that's where the hope is about building a better world. I think perhaps something about the university perspective is that in the rush to embrace the SDGs, they should not imitate each other. They should not try to copy, and that's where the danger of the rankings is, because we're going to look at who is number one. Okay, today it's Manchester, yesterday it was Auckland. What did they do that we can imitate? But rather to think, what is our unique contribution? I'm always reminded of Oscar Wilde's joke about being ourselves. You know, everybody else is already taken. And I think, but seriously, I think for universities, it's so important that it's by being unique and developing your own set of combination of how you contribute to the 17 development goals, not necessarily all of them, through your 3 missions: teaching, learning, research, and engagement. How, you know, this is a matrix where you can have millions of possibilities and opportunities for universities to pursue, with this goal of really making a positive contribution. And to respond at the same time to the question that was asked, you know, sustainability is only just one, you know, one of the 17 SDGs, and but sustainable planets, sustainable societies need contribution along all the dimensions.
So that means we're at the end of the session. So I have to say thank you, arigato gozaimasu, merci beaucoup, alf shukran, Jamil, and thanks to all of you that you helped us to have a very nice key session. And we will then move quickly to the next one. So please do not feel in any way disappointed that I will demote you now to a participant, but it would be great if you could stay a little bit and maybe also share your views on the question that was asked. Thank you so much for joining me. It was a huge honor for me. I feel really small, and that's not easy because I'm 192. So take care. Thanks so much.